Hey, what's up? This is Ray with GP Suspension, and today I'm going to show you how to install a couple of our kits. Guys, we're going to go ahead and install the 39mm kit. Now I'm going to show you what comes in our toolkit. This is our GP fork cap tool. This is our thin wrench tool, and this is the bleed tool. You will also need a vise and a couple of basic tools in order to install our kit. The first thing I do is put the fork into the vise. A lot of these 39 kits have a chrome cover here, so you need to make sure that we remove this. So just take a little chisel. On the back side here, there will be a spot for you to insert your chisel. Pops up pretty quick. I'll just go ahead and take this dust seal off. If you see in here, there's a circlip that holds your dust or your oil seal in. We need to make sure we remove that as well. Just put a little pressure on it towards yourself, pull it up, and it'll pop out like that. The fork this direction and the soft jaw so I can remove the cap. Oh, this one came right off. Something I want to remind you guys is that when you go to take this cap off, the cap is actually under spring pressure. So if you're not careful, when you pull this thing off, it will hit you in the face. Keep twisting it, there you go. So after you've pulled the cap off, you can see the springs there. So at this point, I usually just take it over to my tray, pull the spring out, and this is where the oil is going to start to come out. This is something that I need to point out to you guys here. A lot of times when people pull these internals out, they're sitting here trying to pull the tube apart from the foot. A lot of the Harleys, the Dynas, 39s, you cannot do this until you remove this bottom nut. So this bottom nut needs to be removed in order to pull these two tubes apart. So now I'm going to pull this up, and there's the other internal that's inside that holds the two tubes together. Once you've gotten to this point, make sure that you grab the bolt that's at the bottom. You're always going to reuse OEM bolt that came with the fork. And so now that you've got your clip out here and you've got your bolt out here, these tubes will come apart now. Try to give it as minimal pulls as you can. So what I do is go pretty strong right off the bat. And that's it. This cone also has to come out of the bottom of the fork. And the only way to get that out is to remove the tube from the foot to make sure that it's out. So now that that's out, I'm just going to clean this foot up, and this is what it should look like when you're ready to install your kit. This bolt came out at the bottom. In the inside here, you can see it, there's actually a copper washer, and that is the sealing washer that seals the oil in whenever you install the kit. This copper washer also must come out and be replaced. I'll use a pick in this area and go at the side of it and just try to get a lip on it and bring it out that way. And just go ahead and remove the old fork seal. There's a washer that goes with the bushing that's under the fork seal. We need to make sure we save that. This washer will be reused. There's a bushing that slides off. We need to make sure we save that. It will also be reused. And then there's one more bushing here that sits on the actual tube itself. There's a little gap in it here, and I simply just turn it sideways like this, and it usually pulls out for me. The part where we need to remove the inside of this tube here, and this is actually what needs to come out. You can see here where they installed the oil stop. They folded over the metal here, and this is what we need to cut off so that we can get all of this out. Okay guys, so this is where we come to the lathe. We're gonna make sure that we cut all of this out so that our kit fits. And what I'm trying to do is just get that initial lip off. So I'm just gonna take a little more to it here and see if I can't just skim the face of it off. There it goes. You can actually see where the two metals are different there. So as I bring the rest of my tool in here, I'm gonna take the outside rim of that off, and I'm gonna try to stop when I reach the second material. I'm gonna take that step, and there it is, popped right out. And then I'll just take a little file here, and I'll turn the machine on so that it can get going. And then I'll kind of just shut it off and hit the edge of it as it's rolling over. And you want to round this off a little bit so that we're not putting debris into your fork. Now that we're back, we've got it all cleaned up. We removed our paper. It looks like what it needs to. So what I like to do is I usually just put this in the vise here, And what we need to do is reinstall our bushings. This washer that I told you to keep has a radius to one side and flat edge to one side. The round edge is always going to go towards the fork seal. And in this situation, the fork seal is going to go up here. So I'm going to install this guy first bushing, and then your second bushing that actually sits on the chrome tube. So now that that's all installed, I can pull this out, set it down here. Now before I put this chrome tube into this foot, what we need to do is put these 6 rubber rings that were included in your kit. They need to go in the foot here so that they essentially rest on the bottom of the tube here. So when you go to drop these in here, sometimes they flop around, sometimes they don't like to stay. What I found is a screwdriver that's really long. I take my 6 rings, I install my screwdriver into my foot so that I see it through the bottom, go straight up with it, and then I'm able to pull on my screwdriver using this flat section to make sure that all of my rings are flat inside there. At this point, what I'm going to do is make sure that I hold this foot in the upward direction so that these rings don't fall over. Now I'm going to take my chrome tube with my 2 bushings on it and install it in this direction. Now you're just going to take your fork seal driver. It'll change sound when you install the first bushing, and if you see there's plenty of room for the oil seal to go in. Now what I'm going to do is take this oil seal, put some grease in it to help it slide around. Now when you put your seal on, to make sure that you have the seal in the right direction, when your seal is installed into your fork, you should be able to read the part number on the side. Take your seal driver again, whichever kind you're using. What I like to do is just to put everything together and just kind of apply pressure, and you can see it slide in. So you simply just put your circlip in. I take the 2 open ends first, push them down, use the back side here, and it'll fall right in. Take a flat blade screwdriver, just push on the top, you'll hear it pop in. Here's the dust seal. Again, some people like to put a little grease on it. It's just gonna cover the oil seal and make sure that it doesn't have any debris coming in. Slide that down with your hands, it's not a really big problem. So now I'll grab my cartridge kit, and this is essentially what it's gonna look like when you get it. So what I like to do is I take our bleed tool, I'll screw it on this direction just to make my kit longer for myself so that I can feel it when it goes in here. So I'll slide it in this direction. Again, some people like to do this standing up, some people do it in the vise. Because I have those rings there, I want to make sure that my tube is flush with my foot so that I don't give them a chance to move. And then because I've put my bleeder rod on there, it just gives me a little bit more of an extension so I can feel it. So now I'm going to take my 6 mil with the OEM bolt. Again, this washer that I pointed out, I've actually replaced it. So this is a new one. Put it on here, take my 6 mil. What I like to do is hold this bleeder valve so I can just kind of feel and know that this 6 mil is actually going into my cartridge kit. We're going to put it in just like that. Seems to be flush. So now I'm going to grab a wrench, just give her a little bit so that you know it starts to engage. We've installed the cartridge into the fork. I'm going to put the fork in the vise. I'm going to take my 6 millimeter and just make sure that I tighten that bolt at the bottom all the way down. What we're going to do now is pull the fork out of the vise. I have a little foot here, hold while I have it in the vise. So now when we're here, I'm going to pull rod back off here, drop that down. We're going to make sure that we install the spring spacer first. The spring spacer needs to go in before the oil level can be checked. So we're going to drop that guy in there. Then we're going to install 5-weight fork oil. Fill it up like that. Now I'm going to loosen the vise here. I'm going to actually just pull up on the chrome tube so that we allow the oil to go in between the chrome tube and the foot. You can hear it start to fill up there. So now that a lot of the fork oil has gone into the bottom of the foot, I'm just gonna add some more oil here. And we're just gonna kind of fill it up almost to the top. I've got it filled to about here, and you can hear it and you can see it, and it's still starting to fill up the cartridge. Another thing that people miss is to make sure we get all of the air out of the bottom. What we'd like to do is just pull up on the tube like this, take our hand and hold it firmly. As I push down, it'll create pressure and pull the air out. And so you can just do this a couple times to help the process of getting all the oil out. So at this point, when I look down here, my oil level is about here, and it's just over my cartridge. So I'm gonna put some more oil in there, so when I bleed the cartridge, I'm sure that I'm not introducing any more air there. So you can see it's full there. I'm gonna put my rod in. I'm gonna I'm looking for the cap adapter to screw onto. And then as you pull it up, now we're going to start the process of bleeding the cartridge. You're gonna make sure you just come all the way up. When you get to the top of the cartridge, there actually is the top out spring. So when you get to the top, you can still pull it a little more. And I like to do that because obviously the air is gonna end up at the top. So we want to pull that extra 10 mil or so. I'm gonna bleed this a few times. Now that the oil has kind of fallen down, I'm gonna make sure that I push my chrome tube all the way down and continue to bleed. It should only take 10 to 20 pumps. You'll start to feel it right away when it's all the way bled. It's a nice, smooth, and on the way down it's the same. So at that point, we're full. That the cartridge is bled, what we need to do is make sure we have the correct oil level. This is a Race Tech tool that we use. You can use whatever oil level tool that you have. We're just gonna make sure we're at 90 here. You can use your ruler to make sure that that's where you need to be. What you're gonna do is simply install it here. Make sure that your tube is as far down as it will go. Tighten it back up, and then your oil level gauge is simply going to rest on top. Gonna suck out the excess oil like that, and you can see there, if you look in here, that my oil level is set at 90. Another thing to do to make sure that you have it right, if you don't happen to have this Race Tech tool, whatever it is that you're using, when you feel like you're done, you can simply stick a metal ruler in there, and when you get to the top of the oil, you can see that you're at 90. That'll work as well. The oil level set and the cartridge bled, we need to install the spring. We have the spring spacer in because it needed to go in prior to the bleeding. So what we're gonna do now is just pull this tube up about an inch or two, just to give me a little clearance for my oil level when I install the spring, or else it will pour out. When we send you the spring, it's actually gonna be marked with your spring rate on it. That number goes to the top. So now you're simply going to install your spring. This is a spring jacker that comes with it. This goes this direction, just make sure it's there. And I'm just going to grab the top of the cartridge with it. This is a flat wrench that we sell that comes with it if you order the kit. Again, it's a flat wrench. Many people make them. You can use whichever one that you particularly have. If you look at the spring jacker, it has 2 grooves here, and that's where the thin wrench goes. So I just kind of hold it to the side for now. I pull up on it, give it a little pressure, and you start to pull up on the cartridge. And what you want to do is make sure that you get around the bleeder and on to the actual cartridge there. So once that thin wrench is holding it, you can now remove your bleeder. It needs to be greased. Just take a little bit of grease here, slide it on there, put this bad boy in here. I like to go really slow because it's full of oil, and if you drop it fast, it will go everywhere. So now we've got that installed, we're going to take the cap with the thin wrench still in place, slide it over the spring jacker, and just start to install it on the kit itself. At this point, you can take a 14 millimeter, put it on the preload adjuster, and just tighten down. Now when the thin wrench is holding the spring jacker, what we're gonna do now is install the cap. Simply slide it over the spring jacker, start to screw it on. Then you can take a 14 millimeter and just get to the preload adjuster here and tighten that up. 12 Newton meters is what this needs to be at, so it does not need to be over tightened. Or too tight, I should say. So we're just gonna tighten that down, make sure everything is straight. I'm gonna loosen this tube out of the vise, pull up on the tube. What I like to do when I install the cap is I actually put it down and I will turn it the opposite direction so that my threads start where they need to, so I make sure that I don't cross thread it. At this point, you can just kind of start to tighten it down. Install the cap. You can use our special tool that came with your kit. Tighten down on it. Again, we wanna make sure we don't over tighten it. We're just using these pins, and this cap goes at 12 Newton meters. Just snug it down. Now that the kit is installed, what we want to do is set your preload on your spring and set your rebound adjustment. So you can take a 14 millimeter wrench, place it here. We start our kits off at 6 millimeters of preload. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now if you take a 3 millimeter Allen, if you look on the top here, the brass adjuster is actually adjusting the rebound dampening in your fork. As I just installed the preload on the spring using the preload adjustment here with the 14 millimeter wrench, what I'm gonna do is use a 3 millimeter here on the brass fitting, and this actually controls your dampening. The dampening needs to start closed. So we're gonna shut this all the way in. Now with it closed, essentially in the dampening part of your fork, that is 0. So we're gonna back it out to 10 because that's where our setting is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now that your inside 3mm brass setting is set at 10 clicks from close, and your black preload adjuster is set to 6 for your spring. We've installed everything. We've set the preload, we've set the dampening, and the fork's ready to be installed in your bike.